Hey, welcome to HOA Karen Cases.
The first thing that went missing was a phone charger. Nothing important. Just gone. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. Deliveries get mixed up. People shrug and move on, but it kept happening. Confirmed deliveries, empty porches, silence. This place promised order. Rules instead of risk. Control instead of chaos. Then Karen told me to stop ordering things. That's when I realized the theft wasn't the problem. The explanation was. Every question got softer answers. Every concern disappeared into policy. And somehow, the person managing the system always knew more than she should. So I started documenting. Quietly. Carefully. Because when power hides behind procedure, the only thing that scares it is proof. And I was done letting it slide. The first thing that went missing was a phone charger. Not anything dramatic. No flashing alerts, no angry knock at the door. Just a quiet email notification that said, "Delivered," and an empty porch where the box should have been. I remember standing there longer than necessary, staring at the welcome mat like it might explain itself. I checked the corners of the porch, leaned down to look under the railing, even glanced behind the planter like a fool. Nothing. The day was warm, windless, ordinary. If something had been stolen, it had happened quietly. I shrugged it off. Couriers made mistakes. It happened. Maybe it ended up at the wrong unit. Maybe I'd typed the address wrong. I went back inside, annoyed but unconcerned, and ordered another charger. That one didn't arrive either. Neither did the paperback I'd ordered the week after that, or the small kitchen timer that was supposed to be delivered on a Tuesday afternoon while I was working from home. 3 orders, 3 delivery confirmations, 3 empty porches. That's when irritation gave way to something sharper. I live in a managed community, trim lawns, matching mailboxes, HOA signs posted at both entrances like quiet warnings. Porch theft wasn't supposed to happen here. That was part of the unspoken promise. Rules in exchange for order, control in exchange for safety. At least, that's what we were sold. I started paying closer attention. I checked delivery timestamps down to the minute. I refreshed tracking pages obsessively. When a package was scheduled to arrive, I made a point of being home. Still nothing. The neighborhood stayed quiet. Too quiet. No disturbed plants, no torn boxes, no frantic neighbor messages in the community app. If there was a thief, they were careful. Or invisible. Or neither. The thought didn't come fully formed at first. It crept in sideways, half-formed and uncomfortable. I didn't want to accuse anyone, especially not someone from inside the neighborhood. That kind of thinking felt paranoid. So, I blamed myself instead. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I'd missed a delivery. Maybe the carrier marked things wrong. I replayed the logic again and again because it was easier than confronting the alternative. But then I ran into Karen. It was a Saturday morning, one of those HOA-approved community walk days, where people pretended not to notice each other while circling the block. Karen stood near the corner with a clipboard, greeting residents like a local official on parade duty. She smiled when she saw me, the practiced kind. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head just slightly, like concern was a posture she could adopt on command. I mentioned the missing packages casually, not accusatory, just conversational. Her response was immediate. "Oh, we've had some porch piracy lately," she said. "It's everywhere now. People don't realize how exposed they are." The words came out smooth, too smooth, like she'd said them before. I nodded, but something about her tone stuck with me. Not worried, not surprised, prepared. "I've been telling people to be more careful," she continued. "Delivery theft isn't an HOA issue, technically. It's more personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. For packages that vanished within minutes of delivery." She smiled again, this time wider. "You might want to stop ordering things for a while." That was the first red flag. Not the theft, not even the missing items. The suggestion. Stop ordering things. As if inconvenience was the solution. I went home unsettled. The charger didn't matter. The book didn't matter. What mattered was that Karen, the HOA president, seemed less interested in solving a problem than explaining it away. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed other things. A neighbor across the street mentioned a delayed order in passing. Another complained that a birthday gift never arrived, always small, always shrugged off. No formal complaints, no reports. The community stayed polite, quiet, too quiet. At night, I started checking my porch before bed, even when I wasn't expecting anything. I told myself it was habit. But really, it was vigilance, the kind you don't admit to yourself until it's already taken hold. The weather shifted, early fall clouds rolling in, evenings cooling faster. Wind rattled the trees along the fence line. Leaves gathered in corners where no one bothered to sweep them. The neighborhood felt the same, but my relationship to it had changed. I wasn't relaxed anymore, I was alert. The next HOA meeting confirmed it. Karen stood at the front with her binder, tapping her pen against the table as she moved through the agenda. Landscaping updates, parking reminders, trash bin visibility. Then, during open comments, someone mentioned missing deliveries. Karen didn't hesitate. "We're aware of isolated incidents," she said, "but there's no evidence of systemic issues. These are almost always courier errors or outside theft. Not something the HOA can intervene in." Her eyes flicked toward me for half a second, then away. I raised my hand. "Has anyone contacted USPS?" I asked, "or asked residents to log missing packages?" Karen smiled without warmth. "We don't want to encourage panic," she said. "These things resolve themselves." That was the second red flag. Problems don't resolve themselves. They either get addressed or buried. After the meeting, I walked home under dim streetlights, replaying her words, encouraging panic, isolated incidents, personal responsibility. None of it sat right. That night, rain moved in. Not a storm, just a steady, soaking drizzle that darkened the pavement and muted sound. I stood by the window, watching water bead on the glass, thinking about how easy it would be for someone to move unnoticed in weather like that. How invisible theft could be. I opened my laptop and started a list. Nothing fancy, just dates, order numbers, delivery confirmations, notes. It felt excessive. I told myself I was being methodical, not obsessive. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about the items anymore. It was about patterns, and patterns require witnesses. The next morning, another notification hit my phone. Delivered. I checked immediately. Empty porch, no box, no sign, no explanation. I stood there longer this time, hands on my hips, rain soaking the edges of the mat. I looked up and down the street, curtains drawn, garages closed, nothing out of place, except the feeling in my gut. Karen's words echoed back to me. Stop ordering things. I realized then that this wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't porch pirates roaming through a gated community without anyone noticing. Someone knew exactly when deliveries arrived. Someone with access. Someone who could move without raising suspicion. And someone who was already telling the story before anyone else could question it. I went back inside, dried my hands, and added another line to the list. That was the moment I stopped assuming innocence. Not because I wanted a villain, but because the facts were starting to demand one. And Karen, always present, always prepared, always dismissive, was standing exactly where the answers should have been. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, listening to the rain taper off. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't over. It was just getting organized. As I installed the camera at dusk. Nothing dramatic. Just a small black motion-activated model I picked up online. The kind they sell with phrases like peace of mind and simple setup. It clung neatly under the eaves above my porch, angled to cover the walkway and mailbox. Barely visible unless you were looking for it. I wasn't paranoid, not yet. I just wanted answers, a timeline, proof that I hadn't imagined what kept vanishing into thin air. By the time I finished calibrating it, the sun had dipped behind the oak trees, painting everything in muted golds and quiet shadows. I stood back, checked the live feed on my phone, and felt a small ripple of control return. The neighborhood was still. Too still. The next few days were anticlimactic. Nothing but fluttering leaves, the mail truck's slow approach, the occasional jogger. I watched the footage each evening like it was a crime thriller where nothing happened, an empty stage with actors who never showed up. No suspicious figures, no porch pirates, and still, packages kept disappearing. It wasn't just mine anymore. Alice from 2 doors down lost a cosmetics shipment. Then Mark mentioned his son's birthday gift never arrived. Everyone had a theory. careless drivers, rerouted deliveries, porch theft. But no one seemed eager to investigate. No one except me. And Karen noticed. She always did. It was the following Thursday when she stopped me on my way out. Karen was standing near the mailbox cluster, as she often did, clipboard in hand like it was welded to her palm. She always carried it, even when she wasn't recording anything. It was her badge, her scepter. "I heard you installed a camera," she said casually. I froze for a split second, not because it was a secret, but because I hadn't told anyone. "Yeah," I said, trying to match her tone. "Just wanted to keep track of things." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you mean well, but you should know, the HOA just updated the surveillance policy. No external devices facing common property." My front walkway was not common property. "Where'd you find that?" I asked. She flipped her clipboard open, thumbed through papers with mechanical precision. "Here," she said, tapping a printed clause. "Page 47, subsection D. It falls under unauthorized recording of shared spaces. We take privacy very seriously." I leaned in. The font was small, too small. I scanned the lines she referenced, vague language about resident-facing optics, and recording without consent. "It faces my porch," I said calmly. "But the sidewalk's visible," she countered, smiling. "And we've had complaints before. I'd hate for you to start accumulating violations." She said it with that same sweet threat tone I'd heard in HOA meetings. Always phrased like a courtesy, always meant as control. I didn't answer. I just nodded and walked away. Inside, I sat down at my desk and reread the community handbook, the official one. No mention of security cameras, no exact clause matching hers. The guideline she referenced wasn't law. It was a bluff, and it almost worked. That night, I watched the live feed again. The camera was still up, still running. I hadn't taken it down, not yet, but I hadn't added a second one either. Karen's threat hung in the back of my mind like a ticking clock. What was she so afraid of the camera seeing? Nothing had triggered it yet. No visitors, no motion alerts at odd hours, just silence, over and over. But the more I thought about it, the more suspicious that silence became. It wasn't just what I wasn't seeing, it was how much I wasn't seeing. There should have been someone, anyone, passing by during the delivery windows. But the feed was always clean, precise, like someone had learned to move between the cracks. A Saturday afternoon, a new notice appeared tucked under my doormat. HOA formal warning. Violation, unauthorized surveillance equipment action required immediate removal. The letterhead was the usual, HOA logo, board contact, fine print. The signature at the bottom, Karen of course. President, HOA, no photographic evidence, no timestamp, no complaint reference. Just an accusation, declared official by her signature alone. The letter didn't make me angry, it made me tired. Because I saw the play now. Karen wasn't reacting to the camera, she was suppressing it, controlling the narrative before the lens had a chance to capture anything real. She was used to shaping perception, steering the story before others could write their own. I looked at the notice again and realized it wasn't about policy at all. It was fear. I took the camera down the next morning, not because I believed her, and not because I was afraid, because I knew this wasn't the fight I wanted to start. Not yet. I needed something stronger than one device. Something Karen couldn't discredit with a clipboard and a fake clause. The real war wasn't over surveillance, it was over truth. And that battle was only beginning. After I removed the camera, Karen smiled at me more often, passing waves, casual comments, even a polite, "How's work going?" on trash day. Her voice always cheerful, always public, performance over sincerity. But I saw the difference. She thought she'd won. And maybe she had. That round. But I wasn't done. Because the packages kept vanishing. The silence remained, and I had a list growing by the week. I didn't need a camera, I needed patience and proof. And someone who was already watching. The next HOA meeting was already scheduled, but you could feel it humming with tension before it even began. There was no formal agenda distributed ahead of time. Not unusual for this board, but I showed up early anyway. I wasn't alone. A few neighbors had started arriving early too. Maybe they felt it too. That strange vibration under the surface of our little cul-de-sac civility. The chairs in the community room were arranged in 2 uneven rows. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A half-empty coffee urn sat on the folding table near the back. The mood felt like a school assembly with no principal. Karen walked in precisely at 6:58 p.m., clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 other board members I barely recognized. She moved like someone who had already won. She didn't sit down. Instead, she walked straight to the front, tapped her pen against the edge of the podium, and smiled. "I'd like to propose something new tonight," she said. "Something that addresses the growing concerns around package theft in our neighborhood." No preamble, no context, just a declaration. She called it a centralized package protection protocol. What it meant was simple. All parcel deliveries would be rerouted to a central drop-off point at the community clubhouse. From there, HOA designated volunteers, meaning Karen and whoever she trusted, would manage receipt, log delivery times, and notify residents when it was time to collect their items. "This is about safety," she said. "We're seeing an increase in thefts, and I believe it's time we take responsibility for each other." Several people nodded. Some even clapped. That's the thing about fear. It makes bad ideas sound practical. I raised my hand. "How would delivery services know to drop off there?" I asked. Karen barely blinked. "We'll post signage and inform the major couriers. It's been done in other communities." "And what happens if a package goes missing in that process?" I continued. "Who's liable?" She paused just a beat too long before replying. "That's why we'll have a log. Residents will sign when they pick up. It creates accountability. Accountability for everyone but her." The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. Barely. 6-4. Karen beamed like she'd won a national election. It wasn't until later that I realized how quickly it all moved. No time for discussion. No follow-up questions allowed. She bulldozed it through like it had already been decided. Because it had. She'd planned this. Probably for weeks. The next day, signs appeared near the mailboxes. "New parcel policy. Effective immediately. Please redirect all deliveries to Community Clubhouse. Parcel unit pickup hours, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Weekdays only. Signature required." Beneath it, Karen had scrawled, "We appreciate your cooperation. HOA President" in blue ink. It wasn't optional. It was the illusion of choice. By Friday, a folding table had been set up just inside the clubhouse doors. Karen sat behind it like a bank teller, plastic bins stacked around her feet, clipboard at the ready. "Next," she called out as I approached. I wasn't there to pick anything up. I just wanted to see the system in action. "Package for," she asked. I shook my head. "Just observing." She frowned slightly, then smiled again. That tight smile she reserved for people she didn't trust. "Well," she said sweetly, "let me know if something of yours goes missing. Though we're hoping this system eliminates that completely." I looked down at the bins. Some boxes were still sealed, others looked opened and retaped, unevenly. A few had no labels at all. "Do the couriers scan these when they drop them?" I asked. Karen's smile flickered. "Of course. When possible." When possible, meaning not at all. Over the next week, I watched the traffic increase. Residents lined up for pickups like it was the post office before Christmas. Karen sat at the helm every day, clipboard in hand, checking names off with exaggerated authority. People joked about it at first. "Madam Postmistress," someone called her once. Karen laughed. But I saw the way her eyes flicked, like she liked the sound of it. It wasn't just mail anymore, it was leverage. The problems came fast, but quiet. Neighbors started whispering that their deliveries were incomplete. One woman mentioned her box of kitchen towels had been opened and retaped. Another said the book she ordered came without the receipt or original packaging, but no one filed complaints. Because how do you accuse the person who holds the clipboard? Karen had baked herself into the infrastructure. Any suspicion now sounded like ingratitude. I walked past the clubhouse one evening after hours and saw the bins still sitting inside. No lock, no security, no cameras. A community-wide parcel hub managed by one person, with no oversight. It was a thief's dream, if the thief was the one holding the pen. And still, the board said nothing. Because the vote had passed, because the community had agreed, because no one wanted to admit the truth out loud. I started keeping a second list. Not just my missing packages now, but anything I heard about. Secondhand complaints, quiet frustrations, dates, carrier info, no accusations, just entries. Karen hadn't eliminated theft. She'd rerouted it straight to herself, and somehow made it look like a favor. A neighbor named Charles stopped me one afternoon while I was trimming the hedges. "Did you get your parcel yet?" he asked. I blinked. I didn't know one was waiting. He nodded toward the clubhouse. "I saw it yesterday. Box with your name. She told me she'd text you. Guess she forgot." She didn't forget. She just wanted control over when I got it, if I got it. The next day, I showed up during pickup hours. Karen saw me coming and turned to shuffle papers. I waited. Finally, she looked up. "Oh," she said. "Yes, I believe there was something for you." She reached under the table, hesitated, then pulled up a box that had already been opened and half sealed with generic tape. "Amazon's been terrible with packaging lately," she said quickly. I didn't say anything, just took the box and walked out. Inside, the item was there, but the invoice was gone. So was the plastic wrap it should have come in. Someone had opened it, looked, decided it wasn't useful, then put it back, and Karen was the only one who ever touched it. That night, I sat down and stared at my growing list. Dozens of names, boxes rerouted, items half returned. Karen had built a system where suspicion looked like disrespect, where raising questions meant you didn't trust the process, where the board had already voted and the policy was now precedent. It was brilliant, it was terrifying, and it wouldn't last. Not if I could help it. It started with a spreadsheet. I opened it late one night after another package. A set of travel mugs this time failed to appear. I'd received the delivery notification 2 hours earlier, walked straight outside, empty porch, just like before. I could feel myself tensing again, that slow burn of helplessness. But instead of reaching for another replacement order or typing another fruitless message to the courier, I opened a blank sheet. Row 1, date, carrier, tracking number, item, delivered time, status. It wasn't emotional, it was procedural. If I couldn't trust my memory, I could trust my records. Over the next few weeks, the list grew. Items I'd ordered, what was delivered, what wasn't. Package status updates from USPS, FedEx, Amazon. Screen grabs, times, dates. Whether the package was rerouted to the clubhouse bin, and if so, what condition it arrived in. If it arrived at all, but I didn't stop with just my own. I started listening. Alice mentioned, casually, that her winter coat order still hadn't shown. Mason's gardening gloves, marked delivered, but nowhere to be found. Even Charles, usually the HOA's loudest cheerleader, complained about a missing phone case. Everyone had a story, but no one was connecting the dots. Not yet. That's when I started the second tab. Same format, but for neighbors. I only logged what they mentioned voluntarily. No assumptions, no speculation, just data. Clean and quiet. By the end of the month, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Karen, of course, had an excuse for everything. "Sometimes couriers mark things delivered early," she told one woman who asked about a missing box. "Maybe it was misaddressed," she told Mason. "Could be weather damage. Things get blown around in the wind," she explained to Alice. On a windless, clear sky morning. Each excuse came with a smile, each dismissal wrapped in artificial warmth. She never said, "I lost it." She never said, "It's your fault." She said what sounded reasonable. That was her magic. That was her weapon. But the reasonable started to wear thin. One afternoon, I arrived at the clubhouse during pickup hours. Karen wasn't there. A new volunteer, a college-age girl I'd never seen before, was manning the table, looking overwhelmed. I asked about a package I'd been expecting from a small business in Oregon. The girl rifled through the bins, checked the clipboard, then hesitated. "This was logged as picked up yesterday," she said. "Signature shows. K. Blake. That's not you, right?" Karen had signed for my package, but I hadn't received it. I didn't confront her, not right away. That's the kind of mistake Karen expected. The blow-up, the overreaction, the emotional outburst that could be used as proof I was unstable, disruptive, a troublemaker. So I smiled and said, "Thanks for checking." Then I went home and added it to the list. That night, I printed everything out. My tabs, the photos, screenshots, tracking history. I laid it all out on the kitchen table and stared at it like a crime board, because that's what it was, only quieter, only smarter. The pattern was clear. Items went missing on mornings when Karen had access to the clubhouse drop zone before hours. Signatures were sloppy or faked. Deliveries routed through the central system were statistically more likely to vanish than those still dropped at individual porches. Opened boxes, torn labels, incomplete packaging. She wasn't intercepting packages at random, she was curating them. The problem wasn't just the theft, it was how well it was hidden. She'd wrapped it in structure, policies, clipboard logs, fake oversight. She didn't have to sneak around in the dark. She built the perfect cover story and dared anyone to challenge it, and no one had. Not officially, until now. A new sign appeared the next morning. Important notice. The HOA discourages rumors and slander. If you have concerns about the parcel policy, submit them in writing. Disrespect toward volunteers will not be tolerated. HOA board. It wasn't signed Karen, but I recognized her voice in the phrasing. Disrespect, rumors, submit in writing. She wasn't afraid of gossip, she was afraid of documentation. That's when I realized what I needed next. Proof that didn't come from me. Because no matter how clean my list was, Karen would frame it as personal, retaliation, grievance. I needed something from the outside, or someone. That night, I walked past Mason's place and paused. He was out front, kneeling beside his raised planter beds, pruning basil with weathered hands. We hadn't spoken more than a few sentences in months, but he looked up when he saw me and nodded. Packages still disappearing? He asked. I stopped walking. You noticed too? He stood slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans. I've got a camera, he said, faces the mailbox cluster and clubhouse door. Been up for over a year. I stared at him, stunned. You ever look at the footage? Mason gave a small, knowing smile. Not often, but I've got a few things saved. You want to come inside? It was the first moment in weeks I felt hope. Not a resolution, not yet, but a crack in the wall, a path forward. Later that night, back at home, I stared at the empty porch one more time. Still nothing there. But the difference was, now I wasn't the only one watching. Mason's house smelled like old wood and pipe tobacco, even though he didn't smoke anymore. I followed him through the front room to a small desk against the wall. On it sat a modest monitor, some labeled USB drives, and a weathered notebook with scrawled timestamps and courier names. The camera system wasn't fancy, just one wide-angle lens tucked above his garage, pointed toward the shared mailboxes and the clubhouse steps beyond. I'm not one of those paranoid types, he said, settling into the desk chair. Got broken into 5 years ago, been recording ever since. Most of it's just squirrels and trash pickups. But he didn't sound casual, he sounded ready. Mason loaded up the previous week's footage and scrubbed through it with practiced hands. The time bar slid past, scenes of quiet mornings, mail trucks arriving and leaving, joggers passing by. All normal, until it wasn't. Here, he said, pausing the feed. 5:17 a.m., barely light out, Karen, in a hoodie, hair pulled back, flashlight clipped to her collar. She walked up to the mailbox cluster, glanced around, and knelt down behind the bin, out of view for a few seconds. When she reappeared, she held 2 small packages. No clipboard, no gloves, just quiet efficiency. She crossed to her SUV, popped the trunk, and slid them in beside a few others already inside. The camera caught her face in profile as she shut it, lips pressed tight. Mason hit pause. My stomach turned. That's your name on that one, he said, pointing to the label visible on the top box. It was. Full name, clear as day. The return address was from a coffee roaster in Vermont I'd ordered from 2 weeks ago, supposedly delivered. Never arrived, there it was, in her hands, in her trunk, at dawn. She's been doing this a while, hasn't she? I said quietly. Mason didn't answer. He didn't have to. We watched another clip, this one from the week before. Karen again. 5:24 a.m., different outfit, same movements, 3 boxes this time, 1 large, 2 small. She glanced up at the clubhouse camera, the fake one mounted above the door, and smiled. God, I muttered, she thinks she's untouchable. She's been telling people the porch thefts are outside criminals, Mason said, but the only criminal I've seen is her. He clicked through a few more days. Always early, always alone, always efficient. Every time she removed a few boxes, not all, just the ones she wanted, nothing too noticeable. Enough to feed the illusion of trust, and enough to feed herself whatever she thought she deserved. "Can I have a copy of this?" I asked. Mason was already plugging in a flash drive. "I've got stills too, good resolution, time-stamped, faces clear." He handed it over without ceremony, no dramatic speech, no demand for credit. Just a quiet nod between two neighbors who had seen enough. Back home, I plugged the drive into my laptop and laid out the evidence. Karen, 5:17 a.m. Karen, 5:24 a.m. Karen again for 5:12 a.m. 3 different dates, 3 different thefts, one common thread. Each time, she moved like someone doing something routine. Not hiding, just managing. Not stealing, just taking what was already hers. That was the most disturbing part. She didn't look guilty, she looked entitled. I printed out the stills, color, high res, date stamped. I spread them out on the kitchen table beside my growing spreadsheet. Each line now had a matching photo. Every entry in the log could be traced to her hands. What I had wasn't speculation anymore. It was a case. That night, I stayed up late watching the clips over and over, studying every movement. The way she leaned into the bins, the quickness of her glance behind her, the practiced placement of the packages in her trunk. This wasn't new. She'd done this before, probably dozens of times. She didn't even look at the labels anymore. Like, the names didn't matter. Like, we didn't matter. I didn't sleep much. My brain ran in loops. I had the footage, the timestamps, the witness. But what did I do now? The local police? The HOA board? Karen had built so many walls around herself. Rules, bylaws, a cushion of plausible deniability. Confronting her directly would do nothing. She'd just smile, blame miscommunication, suggest I had a grudge, maybe even try to turn the board against me for harassment. I needed to go higher, and more importantly, outside her reach. That's when the word hit me like a hammer: federal. Mail theft wasn't just petty crime, it was a federal offense. The next morning, I took the drive and stills and locked them in my desk drawer. I made a backup, uploaded a version to the cloud, multiple places. Not because I was afraid Karen would come after me, because I knew what people like her did when they felt control slipping. She would discredit, dismiss, distract, but she couldn't delete timestamps. And she couldn't fake the look on her face when she thought no one was watching. I passed her later that day. Karen, back at her table in the clubhouse, checking off names, pretending nothing had changed. She smiled at me. I smiled back. But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't just about packages anymore. This was about exposure, and Karen was about to be seen, for real. I didn't expect the sheriff to shrug. I walked in with a manila folder tucked under my arm, bracing for skepticism, but hoping the stills, timestamps, and motion-activated footage would speak louder than my voice ever could. I was calm, direct. I laid out the dates, the pattern. Karen's early morning visits, her hands placing my packages, federal mail, into her SUV. The deputy glanced at the evidence like it was a parking complaint. "Well," he said, flipping through the pages without really seeing them, "this sounds like an HOA matter." I blinked. "Mail theft is a federal crime," I said. He shrugged again, leaned back in his chair. "Technically, but proving intent's tough. You know how these communities are. Shared delivery points, neighborhood politics. You talk to your board?" I almost laughed. Karen was the board. Back home, I sat in silence, staring at the folder I'd carried so carefully. It now felt like dead weight. I knew the local sheriff's office wasn't equipped to handle federal jurisdiction, but the way he dismissed it, like I was overreacting, like Karen's clipboard made her untouchable, lit a fuse in me I hadn't felt before. So, I stopped thinking like a neighbor and started thinking like a plaintiff. I opened my laptop and typed 6 words into the search bar. How to report mail theft, USPS. The top result? U.S. Postal Inspection Service. File a complaint. There it was. Not an HOA email, not a police tip line. A federal agency designed for exactly this. The complaint form was clinical, impersonal, almost too simple. I expected red tape. bureaucratic dead ends, but instead it was checkboxes and short answers: type of theft, date, location, suspect name if known, suspect name if known. I typed Karen Blake, HOA president. Then I attached the stills, the clips, the spreadsheet, and I clicked submit. The screen blinked. A reference number appeared. No confirmation email, no timeline, just silence. The anticlimax made it feel like shouting into a void. But the difference was, this void had a badge. Over the next few days, I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not Mason, not my closest neighbors. Not even Alice, who had started texting me anytime something looked suspicious. I needed silence. Karen still had influence, and if she caught even a whiff of what I was building, she'd spin it into a smear campaign. So I went quiet and waited. While I waited, I kept digging. I started searching public HOA meeting records, looking for keywords: packages, delivery complaints, porch theft. I found minutes from 3 years ago where a resident had asked about installing security drop lockers. Karen had objected, saying centralized distribution was safer and more efficient. That was long before any reports of theft. I dug through archived Facebook posts from the neighborhood group. Several residents had posted about missing gifts or late packages with no resolution. In most cases, Karen had responded directly in the comments. Probably a porch pirate. Happens every year. I can check the clubhouse. Might have been logged incorrectly. Let's all be vigilant and look out for each other. She hadn't just hidden the problem. She managed the narrative. One afternoon, I passed by the clubhouse on my walk and noticed a new notice tacked to the bulletin board. Friendly reminder, the HOA reserves the right to adjust security policies without community vote in cases of ongoing threat. The words weren't signed, but the font and phrasing were unmistakably hers. Karen was closing ranks. Then, 2 weeks after I submitted the complaint, I got the call. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. "This is Inspector Ramirez with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service," the voice said. Calm, professional, measured. "We received your report, and I'd like to ask you a few follow-up questions. Do you have a moment?" I sat down slowly. "Yes," I said. "I've been waiting." Ramirez wasn't the kind of man who filled silence. He let me speak. I walked him through everything, how it started, how the HOA policy gave her control, how the packages kept vanishing under her supervision, and how no one else had access to the bins before 8 a.m. He asked for the delivery times, the courier logs, the footage timestamps. I answered each one with precision. "You've been documenting this for a while," he said finally. I didn't think anyone would believe me without it. There was a pause, not long, just enough to suggest wait. "You were right to document. This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. HOA officials abusing mail distribution setups, usually small time, but yours is organized." That word landed hard. Organized. He asked for digital copies of everything. I sent him the folder before we hung up. Then he said one more thing before disconnecting. "Please don't alert her that we're investigating. We want her behavior to remain consistent." I agreed. And then I hung up and stared at the empty screen. It had begun. The next week, Karen seemed energized. More smiles, more walk-and-talk conversations around the neighborhood. She started hosting what she called porch chats, casual sessions at the end of driveways where she'd talk about proactive leadership and community cohesion. It was a performance, a preemptive defense. She knew something was coming, but not from where. Then the retaliation began. It started small. A citation in my mailbox for excessive weed growth, despite my lawn being trimmed just days before. 2 days later, another notice. Unauthorized planter box placement. Then, unapproved porch lighting. 3 violations in 5 days, all signed by Karen, all citing vague clauses from the HOA handbook. I documented each one, took photos, measured everything, created a third spreadsheet labeled retaliation evidence. I emailed Ramirez. "This is textbook behavior," he replied. "She's escalating because she's afraid." I passed her on the sidewalk later that week. She gave me a syrupy smile. "You know," she said, "we've had to crack down on some of the sloppiness around here lately. I'm sure you understand." "Of course," I said. "Rules are rules." She nodded, satisfied, but I didn't smile back. Because now, I had the badge behind me. The online form had felt like shouting into a tunnel. No follow-up, no progress bar, no ticking clock. Just a blinking, "Thank you for your submission," and silence. For 2 weeks, I told myself that maybe they'd filed it away. Maybe they were understaffed. Maybe, like the local sheriff, they'd decided it wasn't worth their time. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, Washington, D.C. area code. "This is Inspector Ramirez with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service," the voice said. Calm, direct. The kind of voice that didn't repeat itself unless absolutely necessary. My heart kicked. "I received your complaint regarding suspected mail theft in a residential HOA-controlled environment," he continued. "Are you available to speak now?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, standing from my desk, pacing without realizing it. "I've been waiting." Ramirez didn't waste time. He asked clear, structured questions. Date of first suspected theft, frequency, evidence types, who had access, how the HOA system operated, whether I had personal conflicts with Karen. "No," I said, "unless you count her rewriting HOA rules to make herself the mail sheriff." That got a brief silence. Then, "I'll need everything you have. Videos, logs, stills, written statements, all of it. Can you send that digitally?" I already had it zipped and backed up in 2 locations. Within 10 minutes, he had the full archive. Mason's footage, my spreadsheets, the fake citations, the log of every package, mine and those I'd quietly documented from neighbors. "Do any other residents suspect wrongdoing?" he asked. "Some do," I said, "but no one's come forward. She controls the board and the clubhouse. People are afraid of retaliation, and she's strategic." "Strategic," he repeated. "How so?" "She opens only some packages, delivers others late, blames couriers, holds just enough plausible deniability to confuse people. She's not sloppy, she's methodical." That word sat heavily between us. Ramirez thanked me for the files and told me not to alert her. "We don't want her changing her routine. If she keeps stealing, she'll do it again." Then he said something else. "This isn't the first time we've seen a community leader weaponize delivery control, but your case is the first with this level of documentation. You've done our job for us. Now, we just need to verify it." The call ended with a promise. He would reach out again soon. I stared at the silent phone screen long after it went dark. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a case file. Karen seemed more energized that week. She rolled out a new laminated flyer in the clubhouse. "Protecting your deliveries, HOA initiatives you can trust." It featured photos of parcel bins, clip art of a smiling mailman, a quote she attributed to herself. "Leadership is making the hard choices so you don't have to." It was Orwellian in tone, almost laughable, if not for the number of people nodding along as they read it. But I stayed quiet. I documented everything. Later that week, Ramirez called again. We pulled delivery logs from USPS and FedEx. Your timestamps match. We also found one confirmed misdelivery complaint filed by a neighbor who never received a laptop. The GPS showed it was dropped at your clubhouse but never recovered. I immediately remembered it. Mark, 2 doors down. He'd blame the seller. "That's Karen," I said. "She would have had it in her hands before anyone." "We're digging deeper," Ramirez said. "We're going to need a warrant." I asked if I should tell anyone. "No," he said firmly. "Let her feel untouchable a little longer. People like her get sloppy when they think they've already won." 2 days later, another violation notice showed up, taped to my door. Notice of non-compliant plant species. Article 6, Section 2. Hydrangea not in approved seasonal pallet. Please remove or replace with HOA-approved ground cover. My hydrangeas were blue. The HOA's pallet list, conveniently revised last month, now allowed only white and yellow. Karen had weaponized landscaping. I didn't remove the flowers. I took a photo, logged it, and forwarded the evidence to Ramirez. The next HOA board email came with a subject line, "Keeping our community safe, a message from Karen Blake." It included a link to a short security update video Karen had recorded, shot from her front porch. She thanked residents for trusting the centralized package process. She mentioned outside threats. increased crime in nearby neighborhoods, and the importance of unity under pressure. She looked right into the camera and smiled. But behind the scenes, Ramirez was moving. He confirmed that Karen had no legal designation to intercept mail, no agreement with USPS, no commercial distribution license, no written permissions from residents. She had constructed the entire system around one word: pilot program. No legality, just language. Ramirez began asking about the board structure. Who else knew? Who helped implement the policy? Were there any HOA records showing votes or authorizations? I don't know, I said. Most of them are silent. Some of them have probably benefited. Packages get picked up. Nobody complains. Karen smiles and moves on. That's complicity, he said. And if they covered for her, it becomes obstruction. I hadn't even thought of that. Karen wasn't the only one being watched now. The next day I saw her at the mailbox cluster. She was leaning against the post, chatting with a neighbor, holding a manila envelope. She saw me and smiled wide, like a queen greeting a rival king. "How's the mail lately?" she asked. "Reliable," I said. "Thanks for asking." She tapped her clipboard. "Doing our best." I wanted to ask if my best included the hydrangea violation, or the forged signature on my last pickup slip, or the gift card that vanished between UPS's confirmed delivery and her clubhouse bin. But I didn't, because she still believed she was in control, and that belief was the key. Ramirez emailed that night. "Warrant request is moving. She won't see it coming." That was the last day Karen smiled at me. She wouldn't smile again for a long, long time. It started with the hydrangeas, then came the truck. The flowers had been the opening shot, a bizarre, non-compliant plant species citation that no one could explain but Karen. But the real escalation landed the following Monday, when I received a violation for parking my truck too close to the sidewalk, even though my driveway hadn't changed in 4 years. I read the notice 3 times. No photo evidence, no timestamp, just a vague description and Karen's signature at the bottom. It wasn't about the flowers or the truck. It was about pressure. She knew. By Thursday, I'd received 3 more violations. Unapproved lighting fixture above garage, improper storage of lawn equipment, a coiled hose neatly racked. And the kicker, exterior paint faded, not up to aesthetic standard, all in 1 week. Each came with a warning. Failure to comply would result in fines. I stood at my front door with a stack of notices in hand, my breath slow and even, my chest full of quiet fury. Karen wasn't just tightening the leash. She was yanking it, and I wasn't the only one feeling it. Alice called me that afternoon. "You got a paint notice too?" she asked, voice tense. "I've lived here 9 years. My paint is fine. I had it redone last summer." "I got 5 violations this week," I told her. She paused. "She's retaliating." "I know." A silence stretched on the line, not confusion, just mutual recognition. Karen was lashing out, and everyone who had spoken up, even quietly, was catching the heat. I emailed Inspector Ramirez that evening, attaching scanned copies of every violation. I added photos, time-stamped, geolocated, side-by-side comparisons of my truck, my lawn, my lighting fixture, all perfectly within code. His reply came less than 12 hours later. "This confirms a pattern of targeted retaliation during an active federal investigation. Document everything. These notices strengthen the obstruction charge." Obstruction. That was the word I'd been waiting for. At the next HOA meeting, Karen didn't sit. She stood behind the podium the entire time, speaking as though she were delivering a sermon. "Increased scrutiny is part of maintaining order," she said. "When systems are challenged, it's our duty to reinforce them." Her eyes swept the room, landed on me, didn't flinch. "Some residents think rules are optional. They aren't. And if we want safety, we need consistency." The board members beside her didn't speak. They just nodded. I stayed silent, but I was done playing defense. Later that night, I found a typed, unsigned note taped to my front door. "Maybe this neighborhood isn't a good fit for people who don't respect authority." No HOA letterhead, no envelope, just paper and tape. And fear, poorly disguised as warning. I read it twice. Then I photographed it, added it to the folder, and sent it to Ramirez. Karen was unraveling, but she didn't look like it. She smiled more than usual, waved to neighbors, talked about upcoming community initiatives. She wore pastel cardigans, hosted trash pickup days, posted cheerful updates on the neighborhood app. But her teeth were grinding underneath it all. I could feel it. She was trying to choke the investigation with bureaucracy, bury it under citations and smiles. She thought if she punished me fast enough, I'd fold. She didn't understand. She was only building my case. On Saturday morning, Mason knocked on my door. "She started watching my place," he said. "I saw her car parked across from my house 2 nights this week, just sitting there, not even pretending to do anything." He handed me a flash drive, footage, in case she tries something. "She's scared," I said. "She should be." Karen's final move came 2 days later, an official-looking envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a notice for special assessment review, citing resident behavioral issues and possible legal liability risk. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. It was a warning shot wrapped in legalese, a message to the board that I was now the risk, not her. I held it in my hand and laughed for the first time in days. Because she didn't know I'd already sent the entire timeline to Ramirez. She didn't know the investigation was past the point of no return. She thought this was still about control. It wasn't. Now it was about consequences. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, documents spread out before me, 3 stacks. Packages taken. Retaliation notices, witness statements, and footage. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was ready. Because people like Karen didn't go quietly. They had to be exposed, system by system, word by word, clipboard by clipboard. The call came early. 8:06 a.m. "This is Ramirez," the voice said, sharper than usual. "We have the warrant." I stood in the center of my kitchen, half a cup of coffee cooling in my hand. "Warrant? Federal. Signed this morning, search and seizure. We're executing it within 48 hours. I felt the air change in the room. Karen's garage, her storage room, the so-called community supply closets she refused to give access to, the bins, the documents, the keys. "Will she know?" "No," he said. "Not until we knock." It didn't feel real until the morning arrived. I hadn't told a soul, not Mason, not Alice, not the board, of course. This had to stay airtight. The fewer people who knew, the less chance Karen had to clean house, or bury the evidence. I parked down the street that day. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Ramirez made that clear, but I couldn't stay away. At 7:03 a.m., a white postal vehicle turned into the neighborhood, followed by 2 unmarked sedans. I watched from the corner of Birch and Lowell, my stomach coiled tight. The agents moved quickly. Gloves, radios, tactical posture, but not loud. It wasn't a raid, it was a precision cut. One of them walked up to Karen's door. 2 more circled around toward the garage and side utility entrance. They knocked. Karen answered in a robe, coffee mug in hand. I saw her posture shift immediately. A half step back, mouth open. The same kind of expression she wore when someone challenged her at an HOA meeting, except this time there was no audience, no clipboard, just a warrant and 3 federal agents. By 7:11 a.m., the yellow tape was up. Neighbors began peeking through blinds. Some came outside in robes and slippers, pretending to walk dogs or retrieve trash cans. The performance of normalcy had already begun. I watched as one agent rolled up her garage door. The sound echoed. Inside were shelves stacked with boxes, some sealed and many opened. Others were half unwrapped, still bearing fragments of delivery labels. Several bins were marked Community Inventory in thick black marker. It wasn't inventory, it was evidence. Another agent opened the side storage room Karen once claimed was for HOA business. No one had ever been allowed inside. She said it contained paint cans, documents, spare lights. Inside, they found USPS packages, FedEx boxes, Amazon envelopes. One of them still had a Christmas tag on it, addressed to Mason's granddaughter. Ramirez turned to Karen. She was standing on the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, face flushed, still in that thin robe, now shivering. "This is a mistake," she said. "I was protecting deliveries. I logged everything. It's protocol." But her voice cracked, because even she knew. It was over. I didn't cheer. No one did. Not Mason, who stood beside me now, arms folded. Not Alice, watching from behind her screen door. not the board member who quietly arrived and stayed in his car, watching from a distance. Karen wasn't just being exposed, she was being revealed, the queen of control, undone by the very systems she created. At 7:28 a.m., they began collecting the evidence. Each package was photographed, logged, and boxed again, this time with official tags. Some had been resealed, others weren't even opened, and a few were unrecognizable. Damage from months of neglect or partial theft. They found return labels, gift receipts, 2 packages traced back to a charity delivery, still unopened. I felt nauseous. This wasn't petty theft. It was targeted, sustained, manipulated, and deeply personal. At 7:39 a.m., Ramirez turned to her. "Karen Blake, you are under federal investigation for the unauthorized possession and potential theft of U.S. mail and tampering with federal property." She started to protest, claimed it was a misunderstanding, said she'd explain everything once the lawyers were present. But the handcuffs clicked before she could finish her sentence. And then, Karen, HOA president, clipboard queen, enforcer of shrub trimming and parking lines, was walked to the back of a postal vehicle, not a sheriff's cruiser, a federal one. I stood motionless as the door shut behind her. She didn't look back, she didn't wave, or shout, or scowl. She just disappeared. By 8 a.m., the street was a different place. Neighbors whispered in driveways. A few walked up to the tape, asked questions, got no answers. The clubhouse bins sat untouched. Someone took a photo and quietly walked away. And me? I just stood there and watched the agents box up the empire she built out of other people's deliveries, one small parcel at a time. The boxes told the story before anyone spoke a word. Inside Karen's garage, postal inspectors worked methodically, gloves on, heads down, logging everything in numbered evidence bags. Some packages were stacked neatly on shelves. Others were shoved behind lawn tools, buried under plastic bins labeled HOA storage in faded Sharpie. A few had been opened and resealed with different tape. Others weren't sealed at all. Ramirez stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand. The irony didn't escape me. One inspector lifted a brown Amazon box and read the label aloud. "My name, delivered 4 weeks ago. Never received, unopened." The air was still but charged, like static before a thunderstorm. Neighbors had gathered now, quiet and wide-eyed. Mason stood a few feet away, his hands in his coat pockets. Across the street, Alice leaned on her fence, phone in hand, no longer pretending not to record. One of the agents emerged from the side utility room, Karen's so-called community supply space. He held a package wrapped in gold foil paper, complete with a red bow. "Found this one behind the paint shelf," he said. Ramirez took it carefully, reading the label. "To Sophie. From Grandpa." It was Mason's handwriting. I turned. Mason had already started walking forward, slowly. He stopped just shy of the evidence table. "She never got it," he said quietly. "I thought it got lost. December 22nd. I sent it early." The room fell silent for a beat. Ramirez gave a slow nod. "We'll return what we can," he said. "Once it's processed." Mason didn't answer. He just turned and walked back to the curb, the silence around him speaking louder than any words. It became clear within minutes, this wasn't just recent theft. Some of the packages were months old. One box bore a spring-themed shipping label from an order placed nearly 10 months earlier. Several items were from residents who no longer even lived in the neighborhood. A paperback novel, a set of kids' pajamas, vitamins, hand lotion, pet food. Each one was small, insignificant maybe, on its own. But together, they painted the full picture. This wasn't random. Karen had been doing this for a long time. She hadn't even tried to organize them. The open ones were tossed aside or tucked into bins. Some had notes scribbled on Post-its, wrong address, damaged on arrival, return. Others had torn labels, the shipping barcodes peeled off. One inspector muttered, "She was trying to build a system." But I knew better. She was building control. At the back of the garage, they found a locked drawer built into an old metal filing cabinet. They pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, a stack of HOA violation slips, blank and signed. Karen's signature, dozens of times over, pre-filled. Next to them were a half-dozen manila envelopes marked pending board review. I knew those envelopes. I'd received two myself, all fabricated, all prepped, all ready for retaliation. Ramirez looked at me then, just a glance but heavy with meaning. This wasn't just about stolen mail, it was about the method. At 9:12 a.m., Karen returned. She wasn't in handcuffs now, released pending formal charges, escorted back by one of the agents. She stepped out of the vehicle slowly, dressed this time in a muted blazer and flats, trying to play the part of misunderstood HOA leader once again. She scanned the street, saw the inspectors, the boxes, the clipboard in Ramirez's hands, saw Mason, Alice, me. Her face tightened, then cracked. "This is a mistake," she said, voice raw. "I was doing what the board approved." Ramirez didn't respond. He just motioned to the evidence table. Karen stepped forward slowly, as if seeing the contents for the first time. The gifts, the open packages, the return addresses from out of state, the sealed ones, untouched but rerouted, the clipboard that wasn't hers. She stopped when she saw the red ribbon on Mason's gift. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But then her expression hardened. "These could have been left by anyone," she said quickly. "Misdelivered, dumped. I was safeguarding them." "You opened them," Ramirez said. Not loud, just firm. Karen's voice jumped. "To determine ownership. Some didn't have labels." "You peeled the labels off," he replied. "We have fingerprints, we have timestamps, we have footage." He stepped closer. "This is federal mail. This isn't just an HOA issue. This is obstruction, theft, and evidence tampering." Karen's composure shattered. "You don't understand. This neighborhood needs structure. Without me, it all falls apart. People don't follow the rules. They lie. They leave trash bins out. I was fixing it." Ramirez raised his clipboard. "No, you were stealing from them. One package at a time." She didn't speak after that. Not to us, not to the agents. She sat on her front step while they boxed up everything. Two postal inspectors cataloged each item as if they were at a crime scene, because they were. By noon, the garage was nearly empty. The side room cleared, all evidence logged. Karen's empire had been reduced to barcodes and brown cardboard. The neighborhood didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no clapping, just silence, shock, and the soft rustle of leaves as the morning breeze swept the street. That's how real justice lands. Not with fireworks, but with clarity. Ramirez walked up to me before leaving. "You did good," he said. "I just kept track." He nodded. "That's more than most people do." I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, like something heavy had finally been set down. As I turned to walk home, I passed the now empty clubhouse. The bins were still there, stacked and useless. The clipboard sat abandoned on the folding table. No volunteers, no sign-in sheet. Karen's system had collapsed in a single morning. All it took was a camera, a spreadsheet, and someone who refused.
The HOA notice came folded in half, slipped into every mailbox by 7 a.m. sharp. No HOA logo. No Karen signature. No decorative formatting this time. Just bold text, centered on the page, "Emergency Board Meeting, tonight at 6 p.m. Subject, Interim Leadership and Parcel Policy Review. Location, Community Clubhouse." Beneath that, a single sentence. "All residents encouraged to attend." Encouraged. Not required. But after what happened, we all knew the difference. By 5:30, the folding chairs were already filled. By 5:45, there was standing room only. By 5:50, even Mason showed up, and he hadn't set foot inside the clubhouse since 2019. No one talked much. No one had to. The tape was gone from Karen's property. The trucks had left. But the image of her, cuffed and red-faced, standing in a sea of other people's mail, that stuck. She wasn't here tonight, and that was the first sign things might actually change. The clubhouse was warmer than usual, sweaty, anxious. Too many people breathing too shallowly. A card table had been moved up front, and 3 remaining board members sat behind it, none of them making eye contact. Finally, Denise stood up. Quiet. Unassuming. Always the one Karen talked over in meetings. But now, Karen was gone. "My name is Denise Carpenter," she said. "I was vice president of the board. As of this morning, I've assumed interim leadership duties until we can vote in a full slate. She took a breath. Tonight's agenda has 2 items: the removal of the centralized parcel system and the initiation of leadership re-elections. Just like that, the room exhaled. The vote on the parcel policy was fast. Unanimous. No discussion, no objections, no devil's advocate speeches. Everyone knew. No one wanted to admit how long they'd let it go. Karen had controlled too much for too long and called it order. We let her, some eagerly, others silently. But now the bins were empty. The clipboard, gone. The warehouse of misused authority, under federal lock and key. Denise opened the floor. Not for speeches, but for proposals, ideas, actual suggestions. The kinds of things Karen used to shut down with phrases like, "That's not feasible," or "We don't have the bandwidth." But now, suddenly, we did. Alice raised her hand. "We need security cameras," she said, "facing the drop zone. No more mystery. And the footage needs to be available to residents." Denise nodded. "That's feasible." Charles suggested returning delivery discretion to each homeowner, the way it used to be. If we want to sign for a package, we should be able to. If we want to take the risk, let us. It's ours. Another nod. Another motion passed. Then Mason stood. It took a moment. He adjusted his jacket, cleared his throat. "Karen took something from me," he said. "Something small, but it mattered. And I let it go. Figured it'd get lost in the mail or show up someday, but it didn't." He paused. "I know I'm not the only one." A few quiet hums of agreement rolled through the room. "I'm not interested in revenge," he added, "but I'd like us to remember what trust looks like. Not policy, trust." Denise said nothing, just nodded again. That, more than any vote, sealed it. At the end of the meeting, the final item was announced. Nominations for board restructuring. All positions open. I heard my name before I processed what was happening. I nominate, organized the timeline. Stood up when no one else did. Helped Ramirez. I raised my hand slowly. "Thank you," I said. But no. There was a long silence. "I didn't do this for a seat at the table," I added. "I did it because someone had to." And just like that, the conversation moved on. They respected it. They understood. Because this wasn't about replacing power. It was about removing it. The meeting ended with a vote for Denise to remain interim president until the next full election in 3 months. No one challenged her. No one wanted to. She didn't need a clipboard or a rulebook to lead. She just listened and acted. It was more than we'd had in years. On the way out, Mason clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You could have taken the whole board down," he said. "But you didn't." "Didn't need to," I replied. "They did it to themselves." I walked home in the dark. Porch lights flickered on all around the block. The silence was different now. Not empty, not oppressive. Just quiet. Safe. A few front doors had packages waiting near them. Not locked up, not behind fences, just waiting. Where they belonged. Where they...
The headline hit 2 weeks later. Former HOA president faces federal charges in parcel theft case. It didn't run in a major paper, just the regional section of the local news site, buried beneath updates on city council votes and traffic cameras. But for this neighborhood, for us, it may as well have been the front page of the New York Times. The mugshot was there too. Karen, eyes down, hair pinned too tight, lips thin and pale, still wearing the same blazer from the morning they cuffed her on her own lawn. I didn't smile, didn't forward the article, didn't print it out or tape it up or email it to the board. I just stared at it for a long moment, quiet, still. Then click save as PDF and added it to the folder, the same folder I'd been building since the first charger disappeared from my porch. Closure doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lands in lowercase. The article listed the charges: 18 U.S. Code, Paragraph 11768, theft or possession of stolen mail; 18 U.S. Code, Paragraph 1705, destruction or obstruction of mail; Property 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 1519, obstruction of justice. 3 felonies, each carrying serious weight. And with Ramirez's documentation, Mason's footage, and over 24 formal statements from neighbors, there was no version of the story where Karen walked away clean. Her lawyer released a statement the same afternoon. Ms. Blake regrets any confusion that may have arisen during her well-intentioned leadership of the community parcel program. We believe this case reflects a misunderstanding of authority, not criminal intent. Misunderstanding of authority. That phrase clung to me like mildew. Karen hadn't misunderstood her authority. She'd created it, manufactured it out of silence and procedure, stacked it like sandbags around her self-image, and called it community service. And now that fortress had collapsed. The next board update came via email from Denise. Subject: charges filed, community statement. She kept it simple, clear, professional. As you may have seen in local news reports, former board president Karen Blake has been formally charged in relation to the federal mail theft investigation initiated last season. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities. Please remember that everyone deserves due process, and that as a community, we are committed to rebuilding with transparency and respect. There was no call for unity, no overly polished messaging, just facts, and a promise not to repeat the same mistake. Alice stopped me on my walk that evening. "Did you see the article?" I nodded. "She deserves it," she said, then hesitated. "But it still feels weird, that it went that far." "I know," I said. "It's supposed to feel weird. Because the truth is, nobody wants their neighborhood to be the one that makes the news for something like this. No one wants to admit they gave power to the wrong person, that they nodded along, stayed quiet, told themselves it was easier to avoid the meetings and let Karen handle it. But that's the thing about power. It flows towards silence. Mason rang my doorbell the next morning. No small talk. Just a thumb drive in his hand. "Ramirez asked if I had any backup footage," he said. "I found a few more clips from last spring. You want to send it over?" I nodded. "He'll want it." He shifted his weight a little, then added, "It's strange. I thought I'd feel better. But mostly I feel embarrassed that I let it go on." "You're not alone," I told him. "We all did." He half smiled. "Except you." I didn't answer, because he wasn't exactly right. I'd let it go too, at first. I ignored the first missing package, laughed off the second, rationalized the third. It wasn't until Karen told me to stop ordering things that I finally stood up. Not out of courage, but out of refusal to shrink any further. Ramirez called that afternoon. His tone was professional, but there was something almost like gratitude under the surface. "The assistant U.S. attorney's moving forward with prosecution," he said. "She's waived pretrial motions. We'll likely reach a plea agreement before it goes to court." He paused. "I wanted you to hear that from me." I thanked him, asked what would happen to the stolen mail. "We're working to return everything that can be tracked. Some of it's damaged, some will never be recovered, but every resident involved is getting a full report. And Karen?" He hesitated just a beat. "She'll lose a lot more than her seat on the HOA." Over the next few days, neighbors began quietly talking again. Not about punishment, about prevention. A small group started drafting new bylaws, limiting the scope of HOA authority, requiring full board votes for all policy changes, demanding digital archives for citations and complaints. It was slow work, not glamorous, but it mattered. Karen had used power to isolate. Now, we were using policy to rebuild. One neighbor asked if I'd consider joining the board this time. "I think we need someone who knows how to document things," she said, only half joking. I thanked her but declined again. "I'm not good at committee meetings," I said. She laughed. "Fair." But what I didn't say, what I didn't need to, was this. My role was never to govern. It was to expose, and that job was done. Weeks later, I received a padded envelope from the Postal Inspection Service. Inside, a copy of the final report, a formal thank you letter from Inspector Ramirez, and a printed inventory of the packages recovered from Karen's home, with my name on 6 of them. 4 had been opened, 2 had never been touched. All had been logged, photographed, cataloged as evidence. Now returned to me. There was one more thing in the envelope. A letter from Ramirez, handwritten. You saw what others didn't want to see, and you didn't let it go. Most people say they want justice. You documented it. Inspector M. Ramirez. I kept the letter in the same folder as everything else, not for revenge, not even for closure, but as proof that even in a neighborhood ruled by silence and compliance, one clear voice, paired with evidence, can still mean something. It started small. A clipboard passed around at the next HOA meeting, not for complaints, not for citations, but for ideas. Ideas on how to change things. For real this time. Denise sat at the front of the room, no gavel, no timer, no legalese. Just a printed agenda and a bowl of mints. She didn't need to assert control. After Karen, none of us wanted control. We wanted community. Anyone have suggestions? That single sentence cracked open the silence that had gripped the neighborhood for years. Alice raised her hand first. We should vote on reinstating direct deliveries. No more bins. No central pickup points. If someone wants a lockbox or camera, that's their business. Let us choose. The room murmured in agreement. I second that, said Charles. And I think we need a policy audit. Everything that passed under Karen, let's re-examine it, line by line. I'll volunteer for that, added Mason, surprising even himself. The votes were quick, unanimous, but more importantly, they were public. No backroom decisions, no vague references to guidelines. Just people showing up, speaking clearly, and listening. It felt unfamiliar, awkward even, but it also felt good. A week later, I found a note in my mailbox. Not a violation, not a threat. Just a folded piece of paper in plain ink. Thanks for not letting it slide. We all needed that. 232. Winding Pine. I didn't know who lived at that address, but the note meant more than they probably realized, because for months I'd wondered if I was just yelling into the void, if all the logging, reporting, emailing, if any of it would matter. Turns out it did. Not because of what was taken, but because of what it restored. Denise held a Saturday town hall under the pavilion near the trailhead. Families showed up, not just the usual HOA lifers, but the quiet folks, the ones Karen called non-participatory, the ones who never showed before because they didn't think their voice counted. Now they knew it did. Kids played on the grass while adults discussed things that actually mattered. Budget caps, lawn flexibility during drought, transparency with legal notices. Someone brought donuts, another brought coffee. Mason brought his granddaughter, and I just watched. They asked me again to join the board. This time, it was Denise herself who approached. You don't have to run anything, she said. Just help build some kind of digital archive, something searchable. So if someone gets a citation, they can see the history behind it. A trace of Karen's legacy, but redirected, used for clarity instead of fear. I said yes, not because I wanted the title, but because I knew how systems get hijacked. I'd seen it up close. If I could leave behind something solid, something proof-based, then maybe we'd never let this happen again. I met with Mason that afternoon. He'd installed a new camera. This time, it pointed at his bird feeder. No more mailbox surveillance, he joked. Just cardinals and chipmunks. He handed me an envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside, the original card meant for his granddaughter, the one Karen had never delivered, the one they found buried under gardening gloves in her garage. Sophie had received a replacement gift, of course. But this was different. This one actually mattered, Mason said, because it wasn't about the gift. It was about knowing someone thought of her. He paused. You know what else mattered? Someone thinking of us, when we didn't even know we needed it. As weeks passed, things began to feel normal again, in a way that was new. Packages were delivered, left on porches, picked up without worry. No more community bins. No more whispered threats of fines. The neighborhood app, once filled with passive-aggressive posts and Karen's curated announcements, now had questions like, anyone know a good tree trimmer? Or, lost cat near Elm Circle. Check your garages. Simple, human, not filtered through fear. I'd gone from suspicion to burnout to full-scale resistance. Now I was somewhere else entirely. Not a hero, not a crusader, just a neighbor. Just someone who remembered that trust doesn't arrive with a clipboard. It shows up quietly, over time, like a package that finally makes it to the right doorstep. The package was nothing special. A replacement filter for my HVAC unit. Ordered 2 days ago. Shipped standard. Nothing expensive, nothing fragile. But when I stepped outside and saw it sitting on the welcome mat, no damage, no redirection, no clipboard notes, I just stood there, watching it, not touching it, just watching. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to check the tracking app, didn't need to pull up camera footage, didn't second guess whether it would still be there in the morning. It was mine, delivered, untouched, unclaimed by anyone else. A normal moment, but one that felt hard-earned. I picked it up slowly. It was still cool from the early December air. The cardboard edges were stiff, not warped by dampness or tampering. The shipping label had my name, spelled correctly. Nothing scratched out, no new tape, no HOA tags, the smallest thing in the world. And yet it carried the weight of everything that came before. As I stepped back inside, I passed by the hallway cabinet where I now kept my folder, the one I'd built out of screenshots, delivery logs, camera stills, and legal printouts. I didn't open it, didn't need to, because this wasn't that kind of day anymore. The neighborhood looked different now. Not physically. The homes were the same, the sidewalks still cracked in places, the pine trees still lining the east edge of the street. But something had softened. Maybe it was the porch lights being left on longer. Maybe it was how people waved again, not out of obligation, but recognition. Real community isn't built on meetings or rules or who mows their lawn correctly. It's built on eye contact, on showing up, on letting others feel safe where they live. I passed Mason later that afternoon. He was walking Sophie's dog. "She finally opened that gift," he said. Took her a while to believe it came from me. Told her it went on a long trip. I smiled. "Not the worst kind of adventure." He looked at me. "You know, I never thanked you properly." "You did." "No," he said, more serious now. "You documented when the rest of us made excuses. That's not easy, and it's not normal. Most people don't want to be the one keeping receipts." "Someone had to," he nodded. "Glad it was you." Later that evening, I walked to the clubhouse. Not for a meeting, just out of habit. It was quiet now. No signs posted. No patrol cars parked out front. No bins blocking the doorway. The inside smelled faintly of wood polish and lemon wipes. Denise had reorganized the files. Actual transparency now. Locked cabinets replaced by open folders. You could request to see your records, and you could opt out of HOA alerts if you wanted to. There was a corkboard where people posted things. Babysitting, leaf blowing, potlucks, no complaints, no violations. It was the same building, but it didn't feel like Karen's anymore. The town finally voted to rename the neighborhood's private trail, the one that looped behind the west lots and past Karen's house. For years, it had been unofficially called Blake's Bend. Now, it was something else. Parcel Path. Denise smiled when she told me. "Bit on the nose," I said. "Let people remember it," she replied. "Not to stay angry, just to stay aware." There were rumors Karen had taken a plea deal. No jail time, but fines, community service, federal oversight, no more HOA positions, not here, not anywhere. Someone said she'd moved across town. Someone else said she was staying with her sister. I didn't care. Justice doesn't always mean spectacle. Sometimes it just means absence. On the last Friday of the month, I opened my mailbox and found something unexpected. Not a package this time, but a handwritten card. No envelope, just folded paper. This neighborhood's different now. Not perfect, but better. That's because someone refused to stay quiet. DC Denise. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. I placed the card on the shelf near the keys. Not for display, just so I'd see it from time to time. A reminder, not of Karen. Not of the investigation, not of the anger, but of why I kept pushing. Why I didn't let it slide. Truth doesn't need a podium. It needs patience. Footnotes, screenshots, calm persistence in the face of gaslighting, and rules twisted to serve one person's grip on power. And sometimes, all it takes is one person saying, "No, I have the receipts." That night, I set the new HVAC filter in the hall closet. As I closed the door, I heard footsteps on the porch. The courier again. A soft knock, then retreat. I opened the door, another package. This one from my sister. A holiday tin of cookies, still sealed, still warm from the van. I laughed, picked it up, left the porch light on, and stepped back into a home, not just a house, where things finally were in their rightful place.